Allan Aguirre with your Incorruptible 2-minute warning. That's right. Am I on my mark? Who's dinging me? Oh, hold on one second. I knew I was forgetting something. It was the what? Am I forgetting? I do that to give you guys some spatial depth. That light's not on. Should I turn it on? I don't think so. Let's keep it mysterious. All right. Hey, it's Friday. All right. Allan Aguirre with your Incorruptible 2-minute warning. Week 14 of our series on Roman holiday, on the Epistle of Romans, the Epistle of Romans, Book of Romans, the letter to the Romans by the Apostle Paul, the apostle to the Gentiles, and also known as Rabbi Shaul because he is a rabbi. And contrary to popular belief, Paul is teaching a whole bunch of Torah, a whole bunch of the law to Gentiles because, well, as Acts 24:14, is that what it is? Let's double check. As Acts 24:14 tells us, before Paul was sent to Rome to go to Caesar, because he petitioned Caesar as a Roman citizen, he had that right to petition Caesar. He was brought before the Sanhedrin. Well, he was going to be taken to the Sanhedrin to, because they had arrested him. Remember, there was a prophecy, don't go to Jerusalem, they're going to arrest you, and he went anyway. And so he's in jail in Jerusalem, and he was going to be taken to see the Sanhedrin, but there's a plot to assassinate him that his nephew hears about, because apparently he was working in the temple of some sort, some situation like that. So his nephew hears about a plot to assassinate Paul. And so Paul says, so he tells his Roman caretakers, hey, that's all crooked. Hey, there's a plot to assassinate me. We have it on good authority. These Jews want to kill me. They want to silence me because he had been one of their own. He had been given charge to annihilate Christianity, and then he actually converts to it. Remember that? So instead, he tells his Roman keepers, hey, if you send me, they're going to kill me on the route, on the way there. So they're brought to him. And so we are in chapter 24 of Acts. And he's petitioning to be sent to Rome to see Caesar. So first he has to talk with Felix. Felix is the guy in charge. Let's read that. Acts 24, verse 22. But Felix, who had rather detailed knowledge of things connected with the way, Christianity was known as the way. See, I'd rather be called a believer of the way than a Christian, because being called a believer of the way means certain things that Christianity doesn't mean. It means that not only do I believe in the way, which is an Old Testament concept, not just a New Testament concept, but it also means I observe the Torah. And it also means that I'm charismatic. That's what a believer of the way was, a Torah observant charismatic, like Jesus. This is where I look at my snarky cam. Like the disciples. Like you're going to find out here in a second, Paul. So, but Felix, who had rather detailed knowledge of things connected with the way, put them off, saying, who's he talking about? Put off the, first of all, let me go to English Standard Version so I don't hurt your little minds with something else. All right. Paul's kept in custody. But Felix, having a rather accurate knowledge of the way, what's that little reference there? Yeah, look at that. Put them off, saying, when Lysias, the tribune, comes down, I will decide your case. Then he gave orders to the centurion that he should be kept in custody, but have some liberty. And that, he being Paul, and that none of his friends should be prevented from attending to his needs. After some days, Felix came with his wife, Drusilla, who was Jewish, and he sent for Paul and heard him speak about faith in Christ Jesus. Isn't that awesome? The Roman prefect Felix is married to a Jewish Jewishish, Jewish. What's the word there? and so, am I even live? And so Paul's able to tell him about the gospel. And as he reasoned about righteousness and self-control and the coming judgment, Felix was alarmed and said, "Go away for the present. When I get an opportunity, I will summon you." At the same time, he hoped that money would be given him by Paul, so he sent for him off and conversed with him. Blah 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 blah. 2 years elapse. Man, where am I? Oh, no wonder I'm too far ahead. Okay, I'm sorry, I was in the wrong place. Verse 10 of Acts 24. I got ahead of myself. So he's in front of the Jews, the people from the Sanhedrin are there, knowing that. And then Paul says in verse 10, and when the governor had nodded to him to speak, Paul replied, "Knowing that for many years you have been a judge over this nation, I cheerfully make my defense. You can verify that it is not more than 12 days since I went up to worship in Jerusalem." Verse 12, and they did not find me disputing with anyone or stirring up a crowd, either in the temple or in the synagogues or in the city. Verse 13, neither can they prove to you what they now bring up against me. Verse 14, but this I confess to you, that according to the way, which they call a sect of Judaism, I worship the God of our fathers, believing everything laid down by the law and written in the prophets, having a hope in God, which these men themselves accept, that there will be a resurrection. Paul admits in verse 14 of Acts 24 that he is a Torah observant believer of the way, a sect of Judaism, and that he also believes in what the prophets are saying, which you kind of have to be charismatic to believe in the prophets, because the majority of you that don't believe in prophets aren't charismatic. See how that works? Pretty simple. All right, I'm going forward with this thing. We are in Romans 9, verse 30, and this is called Israel's unbelief. What shall we say then? That Gentiles here we go. I'm going to read from the Complete Jewish Bible to begin with. So what are we to say? This, that Gentiles, even though they were not striving for righteousness, have obtained righteousness, but it is a righteousness grounded in trusting, in faith, like Abraham. Remember, that's the example. However, Israel, even though they kept pursuing a Torah that offers righteousness, did not reach what the Torah offers. Ooh, that's why we use this translation, because in the English Standard Version, here's what that says. It says, but Israel, verse 31, but that Israel who pursued a law that would lead to righteousness did not succeed in reaching that law. I like this. However, Israel, even though they kept pursuing a Torah that offers righteousness, did not reach what the Torah offers. Why? Because they did not pursue righteousness as being grounded in trusting, in faith, but as if it were grounded in doing legalistic works. They stumbled over the stone that makes people stumble. You have to remember, Jesus told the Pharisees, you have all these rules and regulations, which would be Talmud. You have this fail-safe parameter around every law that exists. And Jesus says in Mark 7, you have all these rules and regulations around the Torah that you make the actual Torah null and void by these fail-safes. See, Israel was so paranoid of breaking the law, of breaking the Torah, of doing legalistic works, because they know that their disobedience is why the first temple was destroyed and they were taken to Babylonian captivity. They wanted to avoid that, and so by doing so, they created these fail-safes, the Talmud, that if you don't break this fail-safe, it's going to be impossible for you to break the actual law. Well, that became the traditions, and that became all this crazy stuff that they made it out. They made this crazy thing, and that by the time Jesus comes around, Jesus actually tells them, you have all these rules and you have all these traditions of men that you've established, and that you've actually make the actual scriptures null and void because of those traditions. And the one example I like to use is the tassels. There's only two instructions when it comes to wearing tassels. One, wear them. Two, make sure they have blue in them. Well, with this same mentality, this Talmudic mentality, this Sanhedrin Pharisaical tradition mentality of creating a fail-safe around an actual instruction so as not to break the actual instruction, they have one regarding tassels. Since they don't actually know what hue of blue was used in the desert, they don't put blue in their tassels so as not to break the commandment. But by not putting blue in the tassels, they break the commandment. See what I'm saying? Does that make sense to you? Do you understand that? So as not to break the commandment by using the wrong hue of blue, they're not going to put blue in them at all. They're just white. But by doing so, they break the commandment. So Jesus says in Mark 7, you have all these traditions and all these rules and regulations and all this man-made crap that by doing them, you actually make the scriptures null and void. Christianity does the same exact thing. Because you do Easter, you actually break the commandment of not keeping Passover. So you make the scriptures null and void by keeping Easter. I could say that about Christmas instead of Hanukkah, but I'm not going to. But some of you keep Lent. That's a replacement for the counting of the Omer, which actually is in Scripture, and Lent isn't. Sunday Catholic Sabbath. By keeping the Sunday Catholic Sabbath, you actually break lots of commandments by not keeping God's biblical Sabbath of Friday sunset to Saturday sunset. Anyway, verse 33, as it is written. Well, let me go back again. Verse 32. What is wrong with Israel and how they pursue and keep Torah? Well, they're not pursuing it in a righteous manner as being grounded in faith and trust, but as if it were grounded in doing legalistic works. Remember how earlier Paul mentioned being circumcised doesn't mean anything if you're not keeping the Torah, whereas the Gentile who isn't circumcised but keeping the Torah, see, that's counted unto him as righteousness, just like the Gentile Abram. So, verse 33, as it is written. No, verse 32, because they do not pursue righteousness as being grounded in trusting, but as if it were grounded in doing legalistic works. They stumbled over the stone that makes people stumble. Verse 33, back to English Standard. As it is written, behold, I am laying in Zion a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense. His name is Jesus, and whoever believes in him will not be put to shame. Isaiah 28:16. Well, guess what? Israel doesn't believe in Jesus as Messiah. So now they're, right, that's the stumbling block, and they've stumbled over it. Chapter 10. Brothers, my heart's desire and prayer to God for them, Israel, is that they may be saved. For I bear them witness that they have a zeal for God, but not according to knowledge. For being ignorant of the righteousness of God and seeking to establish their own, they did not submit to God's righteousness. Complete Jewish Bible, verse 4 of chapter 10. For the goal at which the Torah aims is the Messiah. The whole reason for the Torah, the end game of the Torah is Messiah, Jesus of Nazareth, who offers righteousness to everyone who trusts. I decided to go with Complete Jewish Bible because here's what English Standard Version says. For Christ is the end of the law. And so, see, the Christian mind is pre-programmed to go, see, Christ, he's the end of the law. No more law. That's not what it's saying. Christ is the end. He's the end game. He's the reason. He's the aim. He's the concluding matter of the Torah is the law, because he is the law of Moses. He's the scriptures made flesh. Remember that? So don't be like Israel, being ignorant of righteousness of God. Don't be ignorant of the righteousness of God like Israel and seek to establish your own thing, which it's too late, you already have, but you can change that. How? Well, by submitting to God's righteousness, by actually submitting to the law, the Torah of God, which is Jesus. But I'm a Christian, I've submitted. No, you haven't.
The views and opinions expressed during our broadcasts are solely those of the broadcast producers, hosts, and/or guests, etc., and are not necessarily the views or opinions of the Travelogue Network, its sponsors, or affiliates.